Today we're going to talk about Bill Cosby. He got in trouble for some pretty heinous stuff a little while back, and now he's out free running around. Greg, why don't you tell us about the videos we're going to watch?
Yeah, these videos were not meant to be about criminal charges against Cosby. These videos were originally part of an interview by AP about an art exhibit, and this reporter happened to ask him questions about the charges at the end.
I have to ask about your name coming up in the news recently regarding this comedian.
No, we don't answer that.
Okay. I just wanted to ask if you wanted to respond at all about whether any of that was true.
There's no response.
Okay. Can I ask you, if with the persona that people know about Bill Cosby, should they believe anything differently about what?
There is no comment about that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I think you were told. I don't want to compromise your integrity, but I don't talk about it.
If you don't know who we are, we're the Behavior Panel, and I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement in the military in interrogation and body language. And I created the #1 online body language course with Greg Hartley, Body Language Tactics. Mark?
I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language, help people all over the world to stand out, win trust, gain credibility every time they communicate, including some of the leaders of the G7. Chase.
I am Chase Hughes, did 20 years in the military, wrote the #1 best-selling book on behavior profiling and influence. I teach intelligence operatives and the general public in those things today. Greg?
Greg Hartley, I'm a former Army interrogation instructor, resistance to interrogation instructor, and I've written 10 books on body language and behavior. I spend most of my time in business.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of distancing in here. Well, first of all, we get your name, which is distancing, and there's some waver in the interviewer's voice. I think the interviewer is already under a lot of pressure here. Why not? You got Bill Cosby there, arguably at the time one of the most famous comedians ever. How many albums, probably, Scott, did he sell? I mean, more than most ever comedians ever sold. Everybody had, one of his albums. So extremely famous person there, and a high value person to be interviewing. So even to approach this subject, there's some distancing going on, but Cosby doesn't close any of that distance at all. So we've got your name, this comedian. We don't answer that. Now, why is he using we? Potentially his wife is next to him, so it may be involving the wife in the interview. The persona of Bill Cosby, the guy's there right in front of you. You don't need to distance, but he is distancing. There is no comment. He does say you in the end. I don't want to compromise you, but I don't, your integrity. I don't know. There's just a lot of distancing in there. That's all I got on that one. Chase, what do you think?
Yeah, so right here you could see this trepidation in the interviewer's voice. I think for the rest of the interview, it was pretty smooth. And I think this was in anticipation of asking this question. And I think this is a fight or flight response where this muscle starts to shake right here. It's an internal response to that. And you can see Cosby exerting some serious self-control here. And you can see it in this little tiny kind of side-to-side movement. And you can see it in the clip pretty clearly. And I think that what you're seeing is a very polished person. And he's developed a lot of little routines to control nervousness throughout his life. Anybody who spends time in front of the camera is going to have some of these habits like this. We'll get into a lot more of this in the next clip. Scott, what do you got?
All right. When he says we don't answer that, we see like a little grimace on his face. I think you're right. I think he's going into fight or flight. I think he's about to get mad, is what it is. He's trying to hold that anger, like you were saying, Mark. He's sort of bringing things in, tightening things up, so he doesn't lose it on him. I think he's speaking very quietly. Almost, it's almost creepy. He's speaking so quietly. His breathing rate increases a little bit, and it's shallowing from the chest, obviously, which is what we would expect when you're in that frame of mind. And his cadence begins to slow. And when he says, we don't talk about that, as he starts talking about it, his chin goes down. guarding his throat. And we usually see that when a person is like in fight or flight, or they're worried about something, or there's a myriad of reasons that people do that. But in this case, I think it's because he's getting ready to he feels like he's being aggressive at this point. He wants to show this guy he's being aggressive. He's almost browbeating him, but I think his head's coming forward to show he's the guy in charge, or he's the one that's going to do something if something's going to be done. And he starts talking to the guy like he's a little child, to the interviewer. And then I think you can see the anger building in him. That's why he's so locked down. And his eyes, it's odd because I know he's got an eye problem. So he's just looking everywhere. I don't know if he's trying to recall anything or what, but he's looking around everywhere. I don't know if that's part of his eye problem or not, but I noticed that was fairly odd to me anyway. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, you guys have covered most of it. I'll probably hit a couple of them again. You hear that vocal fry and diminished pronunciation from the interviewer. That's clearly, like you said, Chase. When we talk about fight or flight, we're not talking about full blown coming across the table all the time, but that mere register that there's somebody sitting in front of you who has absolute power compared to you probably will weigh in. I mean, imagine any of us meeting a guy like that for the first time. He has, for me, because I'm a child of the 60s and 70s, he's got a little piece of real estate in my head, from Fat Albert to comedian to you name it. So he's an icon, is the way I would put it before he got in trouble. Then you get one of my favorite things I've ever seen in an interview. And it is when he comes to the second thing. First of all, let's go back, and he says, we don't answer that. That's probably prepared and maybe even advice of counsel. We just don't talk about those things. But then when he says there is no comment, he inhales. That's preparation to speak. And when you hear that, shut up. And this guy does a pretty good job of letting him talk, because he comes back out and says something else. He said, and I'll tell you why, because he did a lilt at the end when he said no comment. That inhale is key. Start listening to people. You'll hear them do it when they have more to say and they're not yet giving it to you. Then he says, I'll tell you why. He jumps to this advice piece, and he starts using what in the interrogation world we would call a pride and ego up. You're a young man, you got integrity, boom, 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 you're working him. And he'll flip it around and go at him with a peony down in a few minutes as he starts to talk about, if you want to be taken seriously, boom. That's what I got.
Awesome. And Greg, I would suggest lava soap to get the car grease off your hands.
Yeah. Can you see it? Lava soap doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Dang it.
I just used a lot of different kinds of stuff. It just takes time to get rid of it.
I have to ask about your name coming up in the news recently regarding this comedian.
No, we don't answer that.
Okay. I just wanted to ask if you wanted to respond at all about whether any of that was true.
There's no response.
Okay. Can I ask you, if with the persona that people know about Bill Cosby, should they believe anything differently about what?
There is no comment about that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I think you were told. I don't want to compromise your integrity, but I don't talk about it.
As the interview wound down, Cosby then continued the conversation. The camera was still running, and Cosby and his wife were wearing lapel microphones.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now, can I get something from you?
What's that?
That none of that will be shown?
I can't promise that myself, but you didn't say anything.
I know I didn't say anything, but I'm asking your integrity that since I didn't want to say anything, but I did answer you in terms of I don't want to say anything of what value will it have.
I don't think it will.
Ma'am, what'd you say?
Sorry?
What did you say?
I don't think it has any value either.
Yeah.
And I would appreciate it if it was scuttled.
I hear you.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Cosby and his wife have pretty much spent a lifetime in front of the camera, and here they're both well regulated from the chest up. Their hands immediately shift into this self-soothing, what Greg and Scott would often call adapters. And right when he says, I would appreciate it if it was scuttled, I'm going to show you something here that's in this clip, but I'm also going to give you a tool that you can instantly apply to almost any situation. When somebody is sitting, especially, You just pay attention to the overall shape of their body. In this moment, you can see there's a lot of movement. So the way that you can filter what this might mean is by asking yourself one question. Is this new position making it easier or harder to stand up and run away? So comfort tends to make us do things that make it harder for us to quickly escape from a seated position. And right here, you can see that his leg comes back under the chair, almost as if to stand up, and his hand is placed on the knee, almost as if to help him get up a little bit faster. And Camille's are already subtly performing what we call a little chin thrust, which we associate with challenging someone else or issuing a challenge or strong disagreement there. I'll leave a lot of the other stuff to you guys. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so he shows some concern as he adapts by doing something inside of his mouth. I don't see it another time. And I think he goes after an out. And then he starts to do this thing. I think they've forgotten. They could have just gotten up and left. But instead, because he still has a mic on, he has a Durst moment. Remember, Durst said, uh-oh, the gig is up. Same thing. The mic was still on. If he had just shut up, taken the mic off, got up and said that off mic, he would have been fine. He moves to front of the mouth talking. Listen to the change in the tone of his voice. It's like he's asking for something. You know he's going to. He gets softer, and then he starts that asking voice. Both of these guys are barriering in different ways. Her hands are locked. His are kind of in front of him. They move to steepling, and then they lock again. He moves his hand to his knee, and both adapt. Now, I call it sacred space when you create your own space and then you adapt and release nervous energy. They do that. She's got a very contained face. I don't know if there's disdain or it's just her face as she's looking in there. And then here he goes. He attacks the integrity of this guy. And then he realizes his mistakes and that's not working. And he tries another approach. We'll see another one in a minute, but that's where we're at now. Scott, what do you got?
All right. At the very first one, he says, now can I get something from you? He tries to be this mousy little pitiful old man who's asking for a favor, coming from this guy who used to be one of the biggest comedians on the planet, probably the biggest, most famous comedian on the planet. And he's asking this guy for a favor. Can I get something from you? And it's a big ask, even though he's coming on like it's nothing much to ask for. And that's when he starts the hand adapters. You'll start seeing that as we were talking about, as you guys were talking about a couple minutes ago. And his hand covers his groin. And we'll see that when someone is insecure, they're maybe worried about what's going to happen next. They don't know what's going to happen next. You'll see that quite often at that point. At the point where he says, what did you say? And he says it twice. He heard what she said, but he wanted her to reiterate what she said so the room could hear it and he could give his point a little bit more oomph as he went along. Then that's when his hand goes to his knee and he leans to one side and he gives his order about how he wants it scuttled. To me, this looked, it's not going to be pre-violence because it's Bill Cosby, but those are the kind of things you look for. Someone will lean back on their dominant side before they come at you. Those are the things. But at the same time, looking at his feet and his legs, you're right, Chase, because your mind is where your feet are pointing, and he's got that thing set up like he's getting ready to leave. He's all set up, getting ready to run. He's not going to run anywhere, but his brain is saying, let's get out of here. This is not good. So let's prep ourselves to get ready to get out of here. And I think at that point, as her head is up like that, I think she's trying to be. I don't know if that's aggression as much as it is trying to show that she's standing by her man, because he's been, he's accused of doing some really, really bad stuff. And she's got to sit there with him and take it when it comes up. And so it's that really uncomfortable smile. And when she first starts smiling, you'll watch that. I think it's her right side it just really quick kicks over a little bit as she's trying to keep that smile going. So she's really uncomfortable. So I think that's what we're seeing there. She's bracing herself as her head goes back at that point. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think what she's trying to show is dignity at this point because she's going to lose a lot of power herself. And all of this is about the subtlety of displays of power. When he says, now can I get something from you? Yeah, it is quite quiet. It is quite kind of meek. But ultimately, it suggests this person just got something of value. Now we're going to do a swap. Well, hang on. I mean, you don't ask Bill Cosby to come to an interview. Bill Cosby offers an interview, especially to something like AP. Clearly, Bill Cosby had something else to pitch, something else to sell, some kind of other PR to do. His PR people and himself have said, I will offer AP an interview because he knows that's going to be distributed. So he's there delivering a message that he knows is going to be distributed across essentially Hearst's media, because AP is run by Hearst, one of the biggest conglomerates of media on the planet, goes right back to Randolph Hearst. So incredible company. Now, none of this will be shown, and we see a really nice big wipe gesture there. We know what he wants it to do. He wants it to be shoved to one side. Very, very clear. And then one last thing on this around the people not compromising their integrity. He says, I would appreciate it if it was scuttled. Scuttled is a great word. Comes back to the Navy chase. I'm sure a term that you might have used at some point, though maybe never have done. It's when you sink your own ship. It's when you put a hole in your own ship. You purposely send your own ship down. He's asking for them to purposely spike this story. Well, that is a big ask for any kind of integrity within the media. I'm not saying AP has any integrity or it doesn't have any integrity, but ultimately it should be a really big ask for any kind of media outlet that you say, spike this story, scuttle this ship for your own integrity. No, the two things do not fit in any way whatsoever. The interviewer is asking the right questions from a public point of view, from a media point of view. Not the right questions for somebody who's trying to retain their power, and therefore the wife there just trying to keep her dignity around this.
As the interview wound down, Cosby then continued the conversation. The camera was still running, and Cosby and his wife were wearing lapel microphones.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now, can I get something from you?
What's that?
That none of that will be shown?
I can't promise that myself, but you didn't say anything.
I know I didn't say anything, but I'm asking your integrity that since I didn't want to say anything, but I did answer you in terms of I don't want to say anything of what value will it have.
I don't think it will.
Ma'am? What'd you say?
Sorry?
What did you say?
I don't think it has any value either.
Yeah,
And I would appreciate it if it was scuttled.
I hear you. I will tell that to my editors, and I think that they will understand.
Well, I think if you want to consider yourself to be serious,
Mm-hmm.
that it will not appear anywhere.
Okay. I appreciate what you've asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we thought, by the way, because it was AP, that it wouldn't be necessary to go over that question with you.
And we haven't written about this at all in the past 2 months, but they want, my bosses wanted me to ask.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
I'll be short on this one. Yeah, there's a bump in this guy's posture when he says, I'll tell that to my boss and we'll see what's up. And he lilts at the end of that. I appreciate that he comes back. This is a give and take. And this guy knows how gritty what he's just been asked to do is and how complex it's going to be to get away from him. But he does a good job of getting away. More interestingly for me is Camille has got the right answer. Get this thing off me. I want out of here. And that's what Bill Cosby should have done at the beginning. I'll live it. Is it? What's that? Like Candace.
It was like Candace.
Yeah, like Candace. Yeah, like shucking that mic. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that. And I'll say, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you. This video is also one of the greatest illustrations of behaviors that we show you as a subscriber all the time. But in this clip, it is glaringly apparent. And this is called digital flexion. And this digital flexion is when the fingers pull inward toward the palm. And when they pull in, this is typically a sign of discomfort or stress. And clearly, he's figuring out at this moment that the reporter is essentially saying he's not going to do anything at all. Oh, yeah, I'll speak. I'll put in a word. So you can see this realization take place pretty quickly right after this kind of throwaway statement about the editors here. And you can see the hand, you can see Cosby's hand kind of just curl into his pant leg right there, which is a great illustration. We talk about digital flexion all the time. This is one of those behaviors that if you could watch people watching an investment pitch and just get a close-up image of everyone's hand in the room, live, just their hand, you could see a whole lot of behavior. You could make some pretty interesting predictions just based on this little digital flexion and extension there. Scott, what do you think?
Okay. He tries to make the AP sound, which it is, it's huge, man. It's, like Mark was saying, it's huge. But he makes it sound like this giant conglomerate thing that's so powerful that the integrity of that company, how could you question it? So he's putting the integrity of the company, and he's blaming it on the shoulders of this guy if he was to add this to his story, which is why he's there, to get stuff like that. That's what they live for. It's AP. They want to get news. That would be news if he got that, which he did get. So that's crazy. Ask him not to do it. He knows. I think he knows it's gonna happen, but he's swinging for the fences, trying to get him not to do it. But he puts all that weight of this guy's reputation and AP's reputation on this guy, on the interviewer. So I didn't think that was very cool. That's not fair. And so he stays rigid, and he adapts with his hands some more. He puts that on his knee, like Chase was saying. He adapts. He pulls on his pants leg there, and then he guards his groin. And he does that thing that Andrew Tate was doing. This looks really similar to that. And he was really worried about what he was saying as well, as he was doing his apology video or whatever video that was he was doing. So I thought that was interesting how they both did that, and both being sort of on the spot at that point. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I agree. There's that movement of the fingers, the digital flexion, and on the knee as well. So that's a joint as well. So protecting that joint and that flexion becoming a kind of self-soothing as well. So Cosby under a lot of stress at this point. It's an interesting play of power going on, because just as everybody's been saying, Cosby says, hey, I thought, AP had integrity, and you nobody interviewer, you're going to ruin this. And so the interviewer goes, yeah, I'll take that to my editors. I'll take that to my boss, because they asked me to ask this. Well, now we're in trouble, because if an editor is asking for this question to be asked, it means that they think they can send that upstairs, which ultimately means it's going to other news agencies, some huge news agencies owned by Hearst. And so they're looking for a really good story, and they've got one. And yeah, when Cosby maybe had some power, had some performance power, they may have buried a story like this. I'm not saying that they did, but there would be enough power to bury these kind of stories. Potentially, again, not saying, in a fantasy world that may happen. Well, the power isn't there anymore. And so you're seeing somebody who had a lot of power, maybe realizing that they don't have that kind of power anymore at all. That's all I've got on that one.
Excellent.
Mark, I thought Mark was going to say evermore.
Did you guys hear me slurp my coffee?
No.
I thought that's what you were laughing at, Greg.
No.
I will tell that to my editors, and I think that they will understand.
Well, I think if you want to consider yourself to be serious, that it will not appear anywhere.
Okay. I appreciate what you've asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we thought, by the way, because it was AP, that it wouldn't be necessary to go over that question with you.
And we haven't written about this at all in the past 2 months, but they want, my boss is wanting me to ask. My boss is wanting me to ask.
If you will just tell your boss the reason why we didn't say that up front was because we thought that AP had the integrity to not ask.
And one other point on that, one of the three major TV writers for the AP in Los Angeles called me up and asked me, Lynn Elber, and we said we're not addressing it. So she said fine, and she just closed it off.
Okay.
And I think you need to get on the phone with his person immediately.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
There's something in this video that maybe you guys will cover, maybe not. But I want to just maybe name this the confidence loss cascade. And this is right at the moment where he's saying you need to get in touch with his person immediately. I want you to watch this cascade of confidence here. This pointing, the way he's pointing indicates uncertainty first. His hand comes right back to home base very quickly. And the hands are close into this interlaced position now, but the thumbs point up to retain some sort of confidence. Then the thumbs fall, and then the thumbs hide behind the hands. And these are happening in steps here. There's a little bit of fidgeting that happens next with his left arm, which he just used to point at the guy. So this left arm is feeling guilty. Now I'm going to cover this up. He then covers the left hand or the fingers on the left hand entirely, and then kind of pulls it back into this kind of groin protecting position. And we tend to protect our groin during three key times when we're feeling vulnerable, threatened, or insecure. And those are the key genital protection potentials or indicators. That's all I got there for that one. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, in a moment of power, what should happen is Cosby should say, get the president of Hearst on the phone right now. I'll talk. And that phone would be, it'd go, yeah, Bill Cosby, Bill, what can I do for you? Well, I've got a bit of a problem here. And everything would go away. But he's there going, you need to talk to his guy immediately. And that elongation of that's about the last bit of power that is being shown there of let me force that you need to talk to his person who I don't know the names of anybody here. I've got zero contacts and therefore zero power, but I need it done immediately because I think that's the thing that might save me. Running out of power here. Yeah, it's a disaster for him at this point. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, agreed. I think the immediately is Bill Cosby in his old days. And I think he's using that same thing that's worked for him in the past. When he said immediately, people jumped around him. There's no jumping. This is not happening. But I also would say in the beginning, we see here a long vowel when he says, the reason why he does a long vowel where he gives himself time to think. And that's what we're seeing happen. I love the fact that he leans in like he's going to say something, but then he does the biggest single adapter anybody can possibly do. And that's rub your thighs with both hands. That is one of the biggest adapters ever. The batter on box. Everybody says they're wiping sweat off their palms, but they have pine tar on their hands. It's an adapter. It's a way to release nervous energy. And then he tries again for this peony up. We thought you had more clout, more status than that. He does what I call protecting the precious when he does all that hand movement, Chase. I remember he's an old man too. Remember, this is not a young man. So his energy is going to be lower than yours will be. And so he puts his hands in front of his crotch. I call protecting the precious. Then he tries to steeple again. And then you're right. He hides those thumbs. We hide our thumbs usually when we're feeling insecure about something. And then it's an attorney or whoever that is that's talking. He seizes on him and says, go get him immediately. I think that is as much for show for that kid sitting across from him as it is for actually getting anything done. Just my opinion. Scott, what do you have?
I agree with you. I think that's his publicist or whoever set the thing up. Yeah, I would think so. I don't know, but that's what it seems like would be in that situation. But and the part where he says, you're right. He says when the really long we and starts rubbing his pants. This is where I think we're seeing him almost get into a panic mode at this point. And then again, he gives the AP this non-existent trust thing that he trusts him and knows it's just really bad. Then when the publicist chimes in, And he says you need to get on the phone then right away. I think he's disrespecting the interviewer at that point too, making him feel bad. Like, oh man, I better get this done. I better do that. I'm in trouble. They're talking to him like he's a kid. This is a narcissistic move, or not a move, but you can see that mask go away for a minute when he does that, because he would never want anybody to see him say that. Coming from the person he's supposed to be, this wonderful, jolly, humorous guy, talking to somebody like that and making that guy look bad and feel bad. So I think we see that little mask slip right there. We see that narcissist hiding behind there at that point. So I think that's really an important thing to keep in mind when you're talking about Bill Cosby, what kind of person he might be. We've all heard wild stories about this guy, outside of what he's accused of doing, about how he would make people, when he would go somewhere, would make the staff sit there and watch him eat, and they wouldn't eat. That's the one I hear time and time again. Whether it's true or not, I have no earthly idea. But people who were there, they've told me, I was there and saw this. It's just stuff like that. But that actually, you catch it on video, that mask slipping, and you see that narcissist hiding behind there, looking around beside from the other side of it. And I think his voice starts to get louder and ramping up, because he realizes he's got a problem at this point. He's thinking about it, because he takes those long pauses, and it's dawning on him in there what all's happening. That's another reason he gets, that publicist says you need to talk to him right now, as soon as you can, because this is going to be as it is now. It shows who he is. It's going to be a real problem for him.
My boss is wanting me to ask.
If you will just tell your boss, the reason why we didn't say that up front was because we thought that AP had the integrity to not ask.
And one other point on that, one of the three major TV writers for the AP in Los Angeles called me up and asked me, Lynn Elbert, and we said we're not addressing it. So she said fine, and she just closed it off.
Okay.
And I think you need to get on the phone with his person immediately.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, well, let's roll around the room real quick and sort of sum up what we got, what we've seen so far. Mark, what did you get? You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Lovely example there of some really quite subtle power plays, that if you go into the linguistics and you see some of the subtle body language that's happening there, you really see how Cosby is trying to fight for some power and really is losing by the end of it. I mean, he starts off pretty optimistic about the piece, but then by the end of it, he knows he's in trouble. Chase, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the interviewer would have done a lot better if he would have said, Mr. Cosby, instead of Bill. Mr. Cosby, I watched you as a kid. You have a really special place in my heart. And I just wanted to ask you, for me and the millions of other people who had the exact same special memories of you, just that you provide us some reassurance that we can still look up to you. I think that would have gone over a lot differently. Instead of this pointed, sharp, made-for-TV interview questions, they could have used actual techniques and some actual skill in human psychology there. If you know you're dealing with an ego, you need to use that ego. Greg, what do you got?
Oh, man, I thought for sure.
I agree with you. There probably are some tools you could use, but I would also say this is a pretty polished and pretty tough-minded guy who's been around a long time. Remember, he was in the Spy Show when I was a toddler. So that's a long time ago. Think of that. This guy's been in front of and behind the camera more times than we can imagine. And I think he came with a plan and he just stepped in it. I think he made a mistake. And that's when he quickly went to his plan that was like, we don't talk about that. He just didn't remember to take that mic off. If he had taken that mic off, we would never know any of this happened. We would just see an interchange and it would be secondhand information. It probably has played out that way more times than we can imagine. Just this one, it didn't play out that way. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think this is a great example of seeing the mask sort of slip on a narcissist. And I think it's a great example of seeing somebody who we think we know and think you've known for years and years and years as another person, who they really are, not their show person, not the person they put up for you to see and to be the public personality, but who they really are at this point, because he's talking to these people in that fashion, or as you would if you were doing that. So I think I'll leave it at that, because I think that's such a good example there. So, all right, fellas, I think this was a good one, and we'll see you next time.
Deal.
So what do you got? You know what?